All right, let's dive into this stack of stuff.
Yeah, it's a fascinating corner of the BL world, that's for sure.
And speaking of fascinating, I noticed something right off the bat that I wanted to ask you about. So, Taiwan is unique, right? Like, it's the only place in East Asia with marriage equality. And I'm curious, does that, like, I don't know, does that impact the BL genre?
Oh, absolutely. In so many ways, actually.
Okay, so how so?
Well, think about it. When happy endings are, like, legally possible for these couples, it creates a different kind of energy. You know, like, there's still drama, of course, tons of it.
Oh, I bet.
But the stakes just hit differently, I think. It's less about, like, won't they even be together, and more about, like, the journey towards a future that's actually attainable.
Right, yeah.
Which I think makes the whole experience more hopeful in a way.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the articles even called out this kind of like happier by default feeling in Taiwanese BL, saying it's like noticeable difference from the angst you sometimes find in BL from other places. Is that something you picked up on?
Absolutely. I think knowing that happily ever after is like a real possibility for these characters, it just changes the whole tone of the storytelling.
Interesting. Okay, so then we can't talk about Taiwanese BL without talking about the history franchise, right? I mean, it's like the gateway for so many people.
It's definitely prolific.
Yeah. Did you find that to be true?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, it's almost impossible to talk about Taiwanese BL without mentioning history at some point.
Right. And you know what's interesting? One of the articles mentioned how early Taiwanese BL was kind of like all over the place. But it's gotten so much better in recent years, like really leveled up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What do you think is driving that?
Honestly, I think it's just a matter of the industry maturing. More talent, more resources, more freedom to experiment.
Like anything, really. The more you do something, the better you get at it.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about what makes Taiwanese DL so enjoyable. This article breaks it down into some pretty enticing categories. Okay, so get this. Steamy and passionate romances.
Oh, yeah. Taiwanese BL definitely doesn't shy away from the heat.
You think that's common across the board? Or is it specific to certain shows?
I think there's definitely a boldness to a lot of Taiwanese BL, a willingness to, like, really explore intimacy in a way that can be, captivating for sure, but also I think a bit more realistic than some other BL out there.
Ooh, tell me more about this realism.
Well, I think it goes back to the cultural context we were talking about earlier. You know, Taiwan's approach to relationships, even within the LGBTQ plus community, it's less focused on hiding or downplaying intimacy.
Okay, yeah.
So that translates into storytelling. That's less about the will they, won't they, and more about, like, exploring the nuances of a relationship. Once those initial barriers are broken down.
Okay, so it's like the drama shifts from external obstacles to internal ones.
Exact.
Interesting. Okay. And then, of course, we can't forget the classic dramatic storylines fueled by sexual tension. I mean, come on, that's what we're all here for, right?
You're not wrong. It's a tried and true formula for sure. But what I think makes Taiwanese BL so compelling is how it weaves in all these other complex layers, like family dynamics, social issues, even a dash of fantasy sometimes.
Right. It's not just about the romance. It's about the whole world these characters inhabit.
Exactly.
Okay, you've convinced me. Let's take a chronological trip through some standout titles year by year. Okay, so starting with 2024, we have Anti-Reset and AI Romance. Intriguing.
It's very right now, isn't it? AI is everywhere these days.
Yeah, for sure.
But then you also have, let's talk about Chu in the same year, which tackles family drama and integrates the BL aspect into a larger narrative.
Okay, so two very different vibes.
Exactly. It shows the range of stories being told.
From futuristic android love to messy family dinners, Taiwanese BL clearly doesn't like to be put in a box. All right, 2023 gives us Kiseki, which apparently boasts a seriously hunky cast and lots of cameos, but also a plot that's a bit out there from what I hear.
Ah, yes, Kiseki. Definitely a case of more is more. It leans into that, the over-the-top, almost soap opera-esque side of the genre. Whether that adds to the fun or detracts from it, well, that's up to the viewer, really.
Good point.
What's your take?
I think it depends on the day. Sometimes I want deep and meaningful. Other times I just want pure escapist fun.
Fair enough.
Okay, on to 2022, which brings us DNA Says I Love You. This is a title you seem particularly drawn to. What's the magic there?
It's deceptively simple at first. It starts off feeling like a pretty straightforward romance, but then it evolves into something much more profound. Without giving away spoilers, let's just say. It explores themes of destiny, choice, and what it really means to build a life with someone.
Wow, okay.
It packs a punch.
I'm adding that to my watch list.
You won't regret it.
Okay, 2021 throws us a curveball with Innocent, which features a DD storyline. That's a pretty heavy topic compared to, say, the rivals to lovers trope we see in #1 for you.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about Taiwanese BL. It can be light and fluffy one minute, and then intense and thought-provoking the next.
Talk about range. Okay, 2019 gave us the Mafia-themed History 3, Trapped. Now, do you think BL benefits from venturing into genres that aren't typically associated with it?
I think it's essential, actually. It keeps things fresh, attracts a wider audience, and most importantly, it allows for a greater diversity of stories to be told.
Right, yeah.
It pushes back against the idea that BL can only be one thing.
I love that. Okay, speaking of history, you notice we got a lot of info from you guys on this franchise, so let's dive into that now. Crossing the Line seems to be a major fan favorite.
Oh, yeah, for good reason. It strikes that perfect balance of, sports, romance, humor, and heart. It's a classic for a reason.
Okay, and then we have Close to You, which...
yeah, that one sparks some debate, to say the least.
Yeah, the article mentions some potentially problematic elements in that one.
It's a reminder that even within a genre that's all about love and relationships, there's still a responsibility to tell story thoughtfully.
What?
And avoid harmful tropes.
Right, absolutely.
Representation is important, but so is responsible storytelling. It's a conversation happening across all genres these days, and BL is no exception.
Totally. So we've covered trends, highlights, and even touched on some controversy. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to that cultural context we mentioned earlier. Taiwan being the only East Asian nation with marriage equality.
Right.
It's kind of impossible to ignore the impact of that, right?
I think it creates a space where creators can explore a wider range of stories, relationships, outcomes, knowing that those happy endings, they aren't just fantasy. They're a lived reality for many people.
Wow, that's such a good point. So do you think that's reflected in the Taiwanese BL you've watched? Do the stories feel different, bolder, more hopeful? Something to consider as we move into the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, and as we continue exploring, I'm curious to see if certain themes or patterns emerge. Do certain tropes appear more often in Taiwanese BL compared to other regions? Are there storylines that feel uniquely Taiwanese? There's so much to unpack.
I'm with you on that. We'll be back in just a bit to keep digging into this fascinating world, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Taiwanese BL dramas.
Where the chemistry is off the charts, and the happy endings feel... I don't know, maybe a little more within reach.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So, before the break, we were talking about the History franchise and how it's kind of like the gateway into Taiwanese BL for a lot of people.
It's true. It's huge EE.
We talked about how History 4, Close to You, received some criticism, right, for certain elements.
Yeah, some viewers felt like, some of the plot points were a bit problematic.
The article specifically mentioned the portrayal of a non-consensual kiss.
Right.
And how it plays into some harmful tropes.
Yeah.
Around coercion and power imbalance.
It's a reminder that even in a genre that's meant to be escapist and fun, creators still have a responsibility to be mindful of the messages they're sending.
Absolutely. I mean, no genre is immune to critique, right?
Exactly. And those critiques can actually lead to positive change.
Right. It's all about being critical viewers and engaging with these stories in a thoughtful way.
I think so.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about some other notable titles you sent over. All right, so we have About Youth from 2022, a high school romance that sounds, I don't know, pretty classic BL.
Yeah, it definitely has that youthful energy, that first love kind of vibe.
Oh.
But even within that familiar framework, it manages to explore some deeper themes, like self-discovery and acceptance.
Okay, so it's like the best of both worlds.
Exactly. Familiar tropes, but with a fresh perspective.
I like it. Speaking of fresh perspectives, plus and minus from the same year seem to have really captured your attention.
I may have become slightly obsessed.
The article even called it an obsession, huh?
It's a friends to lovers story. And the chemistry between the leads is just, wow, it's electric.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's sweet, it's funny, it just makes you feel good.
And what else?
But what really elevates it, I think, is the way it explores the complexities of friendship and how those bonds can evolve into something more.
Right, it's not just about the romance, it's about those deeper human connections.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sold. Now let's talk about 2021, which brings us Beloved in House, which leans into that ever-popular boss-employee dynamic.
Yes, the power dynamic trope. Always a recipe for some delicious tension.
Uh-huh. You said.
And this one definitely delivers. It's got a riveting dynamic that turns enemies into lovers.
Ooh, enemies to lovers.
There's just something about that push and pull that's so captivating.
It's like my kryptonite. I can't resist a good enemies to lovers story.
I get it.
Okay, so Fighting Mr. Second caught my eye because it's a sequel, which we don't see too often in BL, do we?
It's true. Sequels are a bit rarer in this genre.
Yeah.
But it's such a treat for fans when they do happen.
What do you think makes them so special?
Well, you get to revisit those characters you fell in love with the first time around and see how their relationships have evolved, how they've grown.
Right, like you're catching up with old friends.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the scoop on Fighting Mr. Second?
So it's a continuation of the story from #1 for you, which was also a rivals to lovers story.
Okay.
But Fighting Mr. Second adds a whole new layer of complexity with workplace politics and all the drama that comes with that.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's definitely a wild ride.
Okay, time for something completely different. We have Papa and Daddy, which focuses on a gay couple raising a child together. I love that we're seeing more BL stories that explore different stages of life and relationships.
Me too. It's so refreshing. I mean, for so long, BL has been focused on that initial spark of romance. The first kiss, the first date, all that.
Right, yeah.
But Papa and Daddy is a reminder that there's so much more to a relationship than just the beginning.
Yeah, it's about the long-term commitment, the everyday joys and challenges of building a life together.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, 2020 brought us Craving You, which starts off as this lighthearted bakery romance, but apparently takes a darker turn.
This one is full of surprises.
What kind of surprises?
It lures you in with its sweetness and charm, and then, bam, it hits you with some intense drama and emotional turmoil.
Ooh, I love a good plot twist.
Right. Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
The article mentions some pretty heavy themes, like grief, loss, and how those experiences can shape our relationships.
Wow, okay, I'm definitely adding that to my list. All right, and then we have Because of You, which involves 3 wealthy brothers and their tangled romantic lives.
Oh, yeah, this one's a roller coaster.
Sounds like a recipe for some serious family drama.
Oh, absolutely. Jealousy, betrayal, the struggle to find your own happiness amidst all these, family expectations.
Sounds juicy. All right, let's hop back to 2019. We have History 3, Make Our Days Count.
Which features, a bully-turned-lover dynamic. Yes, that's a trope that can be a bit tricky to handle well.
You think they pulled it off?
I think so. The article did point out some valid concerns about how the power imbalance is portrayed.
Okay.
But ultimately, I think the series delivers a message of redemption and growth.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But it's sparking important conversations, right? About representation and responsibility in storytelling.
Exactly. It's engaging with those issues head on.
And that's what matters. Okay, so History 3, Trapped from the same year, stands out for its mafia theme.
Oh, yeah, that one's a bit different.
Yeah. You don't see that every day in BL, do you?
Not really, no.
It's like, I don't know, it feels like a breath of fresh air,
Totally. I think it speaks to the willingness of Taiwanese BL creators to push boundaries and experiment with different genres.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, BL can be anything. It doesn't have to fit into a box.
Exactly, and I love that about it.
Okay, let's rewind to 2018. History 2, Crossing the Line. Seems to be universally adored.
Oh, yeah, it's a fan favorite for sure.
And I can see why. It's got that, perfect blend of sports, romance, humor, and heart.
It's a classic for a reason.
It just makes you feel good.
Exactly.
Okay, and then we have History 2, Right or Wrong, from the same year, which tackles a student-teacher romance.
That's always a delicate subject matter.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think the series handles it with care. It focuses on the emotional connection between the characters rather than sensationalizing the age difference.
Okay, good to know. And we can't forget Mermaid Sauna, which just sounds delightfully bonkers from the title alone.
Oh, yeah, that one's a trip.
Body swapping, a gay bathhouse setting. It's like someone threw all the tropes into a blender.
Pretty much.
And it leans more into the comedic side of things, right?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a comedy than a straight-up romance.
Sometimes you just need a good laugh.
Exactly.
All right, we're almost through our chronological journey, but we still have a few more years to cover, starting with 2017.
All right, welcome back to our final deep dive into all things Taiwanese BL.
We've covered so much ground. Steamy romances, dramatic twists, those heartwarming moments, even some supernatural stuff. It's been a wild ride.
It has.
So I'm curious, as we wrap up this whole thing, what overarching themes or trends really stood out to you?
You know, one thing that really struck me was how often family takes center stage.
Interesting.
It's not just about the romantic love between the main characters. It's about those complex family relationships, too.
Right, like it's not just about finding your soulmate, it's about finding your place within a family, too.
Exactly. And whether that's blood ties or chosen family, it adds this whole other layer of depth to the stories.
You know, you're right. I hadn't really thought about it like that before. But we did see that a lot, didn't we?
We did.
Like heartwarming stories like Papa and Daddy, where the focus is on, like, literally building a family. But even in series like Let's Talk About Chew or Because of You, where the BL romance is just one part of a larger story, family dynamics still play a huge role.
Right. It's like woven into the fabric of the narrative.
And I think it speaks to a certain cultural value in Taiwan, right? This emphasis on family, community, those interconnected relationships.
It's definitely there.
Which I think makes the stories even more relatable, even for viewers who, you know, might not have personal experience with the LGBTQ plus community.
It's something everyone can connect with on some level.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, these stories, they're about universal human experiences, like navigating societal expectations.
Yeah, we saw that come up a lot too, didn't we?
Like in You Are Mine with the boss-employee dynamic, or History 2, Right or Wrong, with the student-teacher relationship.
Right. It's that classic conflict between what society expects of you and what your heart truly desires.
Which is a conflict that, you know, it transcends sexual orientation.
I know.
And I think Taiwanese BL often handles that conflict with a lot of nuance.
In what way?
It's not just about rebelling against societal norms. It's about the characters figuring out who they are, making their own choices, and finding their own path to happiness.
Okay, so confession time. This might be my own personal bias showing here. But I notice a lot of enemies to lovers stories in this batch, like LMUAT. Am I imagining things? Or is that a recurring theme in Taiwanese BL?
Oh, you're definitely onto something. We saw it in Beloved in House, History 2, Crossing the Line, even Fighting Mr. Second to some extent.
Right, it's everywhere.
There's just something about that initial animosity, you know?
No, maybe
like the tension builds and builds.
And then when it finally breaks, it's explosive.
Exactly.
Okay, so last question before we wrap up this whole deep dive. How does Taiwanese BL contribute to LGBTQ plus representation, both within Taiwan and globally?
That's a big question.
I know.
But I think, at its core, Taiwanese BL gives viewers a window into the lives and loves of LGBTQ plus characters in a way that feels authentic and relatable.
Right, it normalizes those relationships. It showcases the diversity within the LGBTQ plus community.
And hopefully it helps to break down stereotypes and misconceptions.
Yeah, exactly.
And it does all that while still being entertaining.
Yeah. Right. It's not just educational, it's fun to watch.
These stories make you laugh, they make you cry, they make you think.
And they leave you feeling hopeful.
Yes. Hopeful for the future, hopeful for love, hopeful for change.
So, to our listener out there, consider this your official invitation to dive into the wonderful world of Taiwanese BL.
We've given you a taste. Now it's time to explore on your own.
Discover new favorites, revisit classics. Just let yourself get swept away by the stories.
You might even uncover some hidden gems along the way.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, right?
You spark curiosity.
And lead you down paths you might never have explored otherwise.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Share your thoughts, connect with other fans, keep the dialogue going.
Because these stories have the power to change hearts and minds. And that's something worth talking about.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another stack of sources and a whole new world to uncover. Until then, happy watching.